Hey, I'm Janet Moss talking about abortion healing, trying to encourage the church to start more healing groups, and also kind of educating the church on how to minister and understand all their brothers and sisters in the Lord who are post-abortive. This little segment is called They're in Your Church. I want to tell you about my mom. To her credit, when we were little, she told us about sex. But my mother is such a lady that when she was telling us about sex, she described it in such a formal and medical way that I walked away from that conversation thinking, wow, that's complicated. I guess a married couple has to go to a hospital to make all that happen. This little segment is called They're in Your Church. I had a friend that told me one time that she feared people could look in her face and know she had had an abortion. And she said early on she was brave and she was going to go to church, and she sat in the back in case she had to run out the back door in case anybody figured out that she had an abortion. There is an unworthiness that comes on unhealed people to even go to church. And it's my duty to tell you, church, that the post-abortive people are coming to church. They might be sitting in the back getting ready to run out, or they might be wounded sitting right up in the front row. But you know how I was telling you my mom was trying to tell me about sex, and in my little kid mind, I'm sure she didn't know what I was trying to figure out in my mind. Like little kids, if you don't tell them, you can't know what someone else is thinking in their mind. So I have this vision of all the post-abortive people sitting on the back rows of churches. Their ears are huge. Remember the media? The media is showing the angry protest signs and the gory pictures where everybody's protesting. So they're sitting in the back of these churches wanting to know what your church feels about them as post-abortive people. And in their little kid minds, they don't know if you're going to, who knows what they're afraid of, that they're getting ready to run out the door. That you're going to expose them or make them come down the front aisle and publicly shame them or turn on them suddenly. I mean, people's minds, especially people with post-traumatic stress disorder, you know. Well, anyway. So, in love, your church, a good strategy for your church would be to print a brochure or a statement or have a testimony every now and then, a little blurb in your bulletin, because these people, believe me, they're reading your bylaws, they're reading your brochures. They want to know how you feel about their issue and if they are welcome there. Because the enemy is doing a good job beating up on them anyway. So they're in your church. If you love them, you will make a statement that's true to your church about how you feel about them, if they're welcome or not. And that there would be no public shaming or suddenly people whipping out gory pictures of stuff and traumatizing them. So that's my strategy for that. I thought I'd tack on to my segment called They're in Your Church and talk about marriages. In the 1990s, I was looking for some help for post-abortive men in Richmond, and I was calling these men's ministries and saying, can you get some help for the guys in my city? Can somebody come here and talk or do a conference or something? And I would call this man in another state, and so he was asking me some questions about myself. And he said, well, are you post-abortive? And I said, yes. And He said, well, is your husband post-abortive? And I said, no. He's not the father of my aborted baby, and he's not post-abortive. And he said, oh, well, in that case, we would call your husband the surprised spouse. And I was like, oh, hoo-hoo. I was like, wow, I didn't know I had a label, like I was the bad surprise. If they're calling the person that marries the post-abortive person the surprise spouse. So that hurt a little bit. But you know what? That's true. I took my brokenness and my mess not into one marriage, but into two marriages. So when you're talking about your church and you love your church family, it's very sad. Let's say just 5 couples in your church are dealing with post-traumatic stress disorder or all the symptoms that come along with post-abortion stress. Anger, panic attack zombie. It would be very hard to live with a panic attack zombie. Shame, broken hearts. That doesn't help a marriage. Grief and sin together possibly. So here's my cute little graphic I got for that one. Here's your little church. Here's your little church on the wedding day. Oh, got the wedding cake and the bouquet. Oh, it's a happy day. The little bride and the little groom are getting married. And then after a while, woo, what happens? Surprise! I'm a mess. Surprise, I'm a mess. Surprise, I'm a mess. Surprise, I'm a mess. Surprise! I'm a mess. In another video, this lady was saying that her marriage sucked. When you look at divorce statistics and you wonder why they're so high, or you wonder why that couple in your church is so squeaky clean, beautiful American Christians can't seem to get it together. They cannot tell you that their marriage is in distress from deep-rooted pain, brokenness, betrayal, anger, post-traumatic stress disorder. If you think about America, if you think about all the men that came back from Vietnam with war distress from trauma, add on it to the women that have come out of the abortion clinics with post-traumatic stress disorder, I'm saying it's a miracle anybody's marriage is holding together. These are days for healing. These are days for praying for miracles. These are days for trauma healing. These are days to send people in your church off for training to do the deep healing that's needed to be done. So my little segment I started out was they're in your church, and they're in your church. I need to take a minute and cry for all the marriages that are in distress. Okay, I don't have time to cry, but it's sad because when you think about it, when you think about these couples, why is it worth taking time to cry? Because that's your church family.